most of you may know about what the NDIS, what it means, but we may just quickly go through some of the real basics, I suppose. So the NDIS, it spells out an acronym. So of course it's national. So the NDIS is being introduced progressively across all states and territories. We are at full rollout now, so which is great. Disability. So the NDIS provides support to eligible people with intellectual, physical, sensory, cognitive, psychosocial disability. Early intervention supports can also be provided to eligible for people with disability or children, developmental delay. Insurance is the next word within this. So you may or may not know that a percentage of your Medicare benefit tax goes into a funding pool to fund the NDIS. So this gives everyone within Australia peace of mind if they or their loved one acquire or are born with a permanent and significant disability, that they will get the support that they need. So it runs and operates from a governmental perspective a little bit like Medicare from a funding perspective. And the other thing is that it's a scheme, so it's not a welfare system. So it's designed to help people get support that they need, so their skills and independence improve over time. And we'll come back to that independence word a little bit later on in the session and how we go through this as well. Just for your reference, I wanted to give a little bit of a description around you know, the previous model of what used to happen with disability supports and the new model of disability now under the NDIS. I think this is really important because it really does highlight that basically the old model was that the funds were actually given to the service provider. And so you as a person with disability would need to then go to the service provider to actually obtain any supports that you might need and go through an application process. Now, if that service provider got a certain bucket of money from the government, and if they run out of that money, then you miss out on getting those supports. So it was a really sort of broken system, and it was very unfair around who got what. And it also depended on which state that you lived in. I can give you a couple of personal examples. So me as a double amputee, with the previous system and how it worked, in order to get my prostheses made under the Victorian government process, I only had an option of to go to one place to actually get my prostheses, and that was it. I got base model prostheses, and they were often you know, reused parts, and they weren't new, and the quality really wasn't there. So that's just one example of how that previous model used to work. So thinking about where we are now, so under the NDIS, so it is actually the person with disability that actually receives the funding and has some choice and control about where and how they spend it. We'll go into further detail about how that works later. But as you can see, this model is, you know, from my perspective, a much fairer model in regards to how you can actually achieve your goals and get to where you need to go. I'll move to the next slide. And what we have here is what we call the social model of disability. Now, this is going to be a little bit of a takeaway, I hope, for everybody once we go through this, because basically there was an old version and doctors are still back in the old medical model of disability. So what we've moved to now is the social model of disability. So under the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability, you'll see the definition that's outlined there. Oh, I jumped to the wrong slide. I do apologise. So you'll see that disability includes long-term, lasting 6 months or more, physical, mental health, intellectual, neurological and sensory impairments, which Now, this is the important part. In interaction with various attitudinal and environmental barriers may hinder full and effective participation in society on an equal basis with others. So the old model of the medical model of disability, you know, has a concept around that people with disability needed to be fixed or cured. Whereas now we're going into this mode that we actually need the environment and attitudinal barriers removed for us so that we can actually participate fully in society. I will move to the next slide, and just to go through in regards to this, I'm going to have to swap screens, so just bear with me on my technology skills. Okay. I'll quickly go through this video. So bear with me while I play this.
According to the medical model of disability, the word disabled means less able. Less able to achieve your potential, less able to have meaningful relationships, less able to play an active part in the world around you, and that this is just your bad luck. This outdated view of the world puts the responsibility of overcoming disabling barriers on the person with an impairment. But this idea is changing. The more modern social model of disability says that a person doesn't have a disability, but that they are disabled. They are disabled by society. It is the attitudes and physical barriers imposed on them by society that prevents them from achieving their potential. The social model was developed by disabled people and their allies to help them take action against discrimination and to empower people to find solutions, remove barriers, and campaign together for equality and human rights. They showed how people with lots of different impairments face many of the same problems. These disabling barriers include prejudiced opinions and attitudes, restricted access, and people being systematically excluded. The social model looks for the ways that society can be planned and organised in order to provide accessibility, independence, and opportunity in a way that enables people rather than disables them. What we learn from the social model of disability is that disability is a social construct created by social barriers, barriers which can be eliminated. We learn that it is the responsibility of government, public spaces, businesses, and individual people to make the changes, to increase the access, and build a more equal society, where everyone has the opportunity to reach their full potential.
Amanda, we can't hear you.
I do apologise, technology got me there. As I said before, the medical model of disability is really outdated, and we are moving towards the social model of disability. I'll run through that a little bit further when we talk about when you apply for the NDIS. It is something important to keep into the back of your mind whilst you're doing so. If we move to the next slide, I just want to really talk about the interaction, how disability and scleroderma actually interact. So as we all know, scleroderma is a medical condition and it is not specifically a disability. Although scleroderma can contribute to the reduced mobility and functional limitations of your everyday activities. So my core advice is when applying for the NDIS, really to make sure that you do not actually put scleroderma as your primary disability as a wording. most likely it will get rejected. What we need to think about is, the sorts of things that actually happen from our scleroderma, and they all do have a little bit of their own types of, excuse me, their own types of, wording that you can actually use instead. So if we think about what we've got here on the screen, so you can think and talk about how you can explain how your contractures might actually impact in regards to disability. So the tightening and hardening of the skin and tissue surrounding your joints, resulting in decreased movement of the wrist, elbows, feet, knees, whatever it might be, causes mobility impairment and disability. So then if we think about pain and stiffness in joints, which of course is quite common with scleroderma, so swelling, stiffness or tenderness accompanying, like an arthritis-like inflammation causes reduced mobility and disability. So these are the sorts of things we really need to think about when we're doing our application. Thinking about the emotional aspects of scleroderma. So, you're feeling alone, where to turn to for help. So thinking about that disbelief, and there's a sense of grief, anger, fear, denial, sadness, and sometimes that can lead into depression. So that's another thing that, if that's applicable to yourself, that you can actually make sure that you kind of pop that down as some type of diagnosis as well. The other thing, of course, is the oral, facial, and dental restrictions. So general tightening of the skin over the face and the opening of the mouth, that can actually also be an impact in regards to speech, brushing your teeth, eating utensils, all of those sorts of things. So again, if that's an impact, that would be something, worthy of putting into your application as well. And then, of course, we've got the digestive system. So thinking about, all the sorts of things that, weight loss and bowel motility and all of those other issues that come through your digestive system and gastrointestinal tract. Now, I've popped the other ones in there. So they're the sorts of things that you can still highlight into your application. So things like fatigue, lack of energy, generalized weakness, weight loss, vague and aching muscles, brain fog, as we all know and we talk about quite often. So these are sort of the sorts of things that we also need to think about when we go through into our application. So I'll just quickly move to the next slide. So this is kind of where you can think and get an idea if you might be eligible. So thinking about the things on this particular slide. So the process of NDIS is setting out goals. So thinking about what are the supports that you actually currently receive, and what are the sorts of things that you really want to achieve. So if your disability or scleroderma is impacting on you living independently, and here's that independence word again, and it's actually, causing a barrier for you to continue to work, raising a family, or to travel, whatever that might be, think about that as an impact in your life, and how that might, go into your application as well. Then we talk about the functional impacts. So how does scleroderma impact your ability to complete everyday tasks? So really thinking about, getting out of bed, getting dressed, preparing meals, and all of those sorts of interactions that you might, need to do every single day. The other one too is, of course, can you still drive your car? Do you need supports in regards to transport and getting around and those sorts of things? And then we kind of think about the formal supports and informal supports that you already have in place. So do you have somebody that is helping you, get to your medical appointment, or helping you go grocery shopping, or participating in social activities? So they're all the sorts of things that you need to really sit down and think about, even before you start to apply to the NDIS. Just move to the next slide. So there's a little bit to go through here in regards to applying for the NDIS. So the first step is around getting a copy of the access request form. So this now partly what they do is they'll do some screening over the phone. So they'll ask you a series of questions, and also, just to identify you and make sure that they've got you on your MyGov account. And also thinking about, they'll screen and sort of say, what is your disability, or go through some initial questions to talk about, the impacts. And that's why it's handy to have those ideas from the screen before, in thinking around, what are the impacts and the, the disability items that we went through before in regards to that. So scleroderma itself will not be enough to get you over the line in regards to applying for the NDIS. So what you'll also need to do is provide some supporting evidence with your access request form. So you can have either your GP or your specialist fill out part of the component on the form. But what you will need to also do is pretty much advocate and also maybe guide your GP or specialist. Again, a lot of doctors are not really that, parfait with the NDIS, so they may need a little bit of guidance around some of the questions. So documenting all of the limitations of your daily activities and how they impact you. So it is a good idea to come prepared with your doctor about what those sorts of things are, to go through the process when completing the form with them. So the doctor will also need to make sure that and state that you have a permanent disability. And also thinking about, oh gosh, I'm not good with my screen today. And also thinking about, any reports or assessments that might be able to go with that. We do know at this current point in time, unfortunately, and this may be only Victoria specific, not quite sure about the rest of the country, but things such as like an occupational therapist report is always a great idea to have along with your NDIS application. However, in Victoria at the moment, there is a 12-month wait for occupational therapists. So unfortunately, that one itself here in Victoria is not going to assist in any way, shape or form. But you can get anything from other allied health professionals that you might already see, whether that be a physiotherapist, a podiatrist, any other allied health, a psychologist. If you've got as many reports from different professionals as possible, that does actually help your application. So in applying for the NDIS. I just want to go through a few things that, might be there in regards to helping you along the way. You can actually have an advocate to support you. Now that can be a family member, it can be, and you can also do that to take them to the doctor's appointment with you as well. If you're not confident to go through the application process on your own, you can still have a family member or a specific advocate to support you. As I said before, you may need to coach or guide your GP or specialist in completing the form. So there'll be some quite specific questions in there, which really need a lot of thought process about. So, thinking about all of your daily activities and what are the barriers that impact you every single day. So you'll need to coach and guide them through that process. Scleroderma Australia can assist with a generic letter on how scleroderma and disability interact. So you can always email us at Scleroderma Australia, so just directly to me. And we can just do, it's a generic letter. It's actually not saying anything about your own personal condition. It actually just talks about the impact on how the two interact together. So I put this letter together to help quite a few people, and I will gladly say that those that I've provided this letter to actually got their applications approved. So I think it's a really handy thing to have. So I'm very, very happy to support anyone who is applying for the NDIS. We also have on the Scleroderma Australia and Scleroderma Victoria website under our resource section, Understanding Scleroderma and the NDIS brochure. It is always a good idea to attach that as well, because it goes into further detail around how the interactions work between scleroderma and disability. Okay, this is the trickiest bit. A little bit like for those who attended last month's session, appealing decisions, if you are rejected in regards to this, is quite a complex process. So basically the first step, if you are denied access to the NDIS, you have the right to ask the NDIA for an internal review of your access decision. So there's a bit of a process with that. That generally takes, you know, maybe 6 to 8 weeks for that to happen. So again, sitting around twiddling your thumbs in that aspect, they may come back and just sort of say to you as well that they need additional supporting evidence. So that again is where, if you haven't supplied anything from an OT, a podiatrist, an allied health professional, you know, they may want more information. But again, that's kind of a pretty hard task to get through. And my advice would always be is try to do that as you're doing your application, rather than waiting until afterwards. If you disagree with the internal review that the NDIS or the NDIA comes back with, you can apply to review this through the Administrative Appeals Tribunal. Now, this process can be quite daunting. So basically, it will be like a conciliation type process. So you'll have, you know, a bunch of members from the AAT going through your case notes, and you'll also have the NDIA, and then of course there will be yourself. So it can be quite daunting and overwhelming. Again, I would always recommend, if you're going down that road, that you actually get an advocate to support you through this process. So just again here, thinking about advocacy, so there's a few places that you can go to directly in regards to finding an advocate to support you through this process. So there's the Disability Advocacy Network Australia, so they'll be able to connect you with an advocate that's close to you across the country. And then there's the National Disability Advocacy Program. So again, that's to reach out to find somebody that's close and near to you. And then we've actually got Special Voices, which I've actually popped in here. That's actually a local Victorian one. So Angela, who runs this organisation, her and I have worked together quite some time. And so she's a qualified lawyer, and basically her advocacy is targeted and really specific around getting NDIS applications across the line. So what we might do now is we will stop here, and I am going to open up the floor to questions.